People listen to my videos and they reach out, whether it's TikTok, whether it's YouTube, people will say, I really resonate with what you're talking about. And it reminds me a lot of nonviolent communication, or NVC. People have said this to me over the years. And I'm like, what is NVC? What is this? I've heard of it. I didn't really know, but I've heard it enough times where people have mentioned it in conjunction with some of the things that I've taught that I did a little bit of a deep dive into it. And so I'm excited to talk about it. It's just a different way of framing some of the ideas that we talk about. I always am saying that we have to lead with healthy communication from the inside out. So in other words, healthy communication is not talking honestly about the other person. It's more talking honestly about us and pulling back the curtain, right? That's the idea behind nonviolent communication. So today I want to go over where it came from, what are the basic tenets, what that actually looks like, the philosophy behind it, and then a structure that you can use to communicate where you know that it's going to be honest and truthful, but without the narratives, without the projection, without the stories, without activating defensiveness or shame in your partner. If I were to, in a nutshell, describe nonviolent communication, I have to say a little bit about the history. It's developed by Marshall Rosenberg, and the focus on it is really about not so much what's being said, but what are the needs behind what's being said. That needs are what drive communication, and the focus is on empathy. We are sharing so that we can be witnessed and so that we can receive empathy and support. We can be seen and heard, because that's what builds emotional connection. And emotional connection creates the safety that allows difficult, challenging communication to occur. Because any long-term relationship, there's going to be hard conversations. And some people might know how to do it technically speaking, but they have emotions that get in the way. And so it's something that is not as easy to do as it sounds like, right? And so we have to look inward and go, what's really behind this? What are the internal things that are stopping me from saying what I want to say? Fear that they're going to shut down, fear that I'm going to sound like I'm criticizing. These are the reasons why people either hold back from honest communication, or they communicate when they're angry and it comes out wrong and it's almost a boundary violation, hence the word violent. So it's sort of reframing violent. It's not about physical violence, it's about emotional violence. It reduces blame, it increases clarity about what's actually going on. Gay and Katie Hendricks talk about microscopic honesty in their book, Conscious Loving. It's the same idea. I'm going to get really granular about what's going on inside of me. So that's where the increase in clarity comes from. And like I said before, it builds safety, which will allow the communication to land. So what it does is it basically teaches us to get underneath our reactive patterns and look at, okay, what's true inside of us? What are my feelings? What are my needs behind that? What are the needs that I have that are not being met or activated, or maybe there's some core wounds? Now I'm having some feelings, and now how can I express those or share those for the sake of emotional intimacy that does not sound judgmental or critical? And it's hard, right? Because we are going to judge sometimes. Like, we're human, our brains do that. We discern, we figure out what's not us as a way of establishing our own identity. Who am I? I'm not that. I don't stand for that, right? So that's normal. So we have to remember that sometimes there's a value judgment behind it. And when that sneaks into our communication, that's going to make it harder to be heard. And you might have some really important things that you're feeling, some really important needs that are worth honoring, that it's difficult to share because you're not sure how to do it in a way where the other person can actually receive it. So that's what this is all about. Nonviolent communication helps couples move from defensiveness to greater understanding. It cuts through reactivity. It encourages vulnerability, which is just sharing the truth without a guarantee of outcome. It helps partners truly hear each other and what's behind the communication, and it creates repair instead of escalation. It's all about, how do we de-escalate? How do we stay calm? How do we hear each other from a neutral, loving, open, soft place? That's what it's for. I think that in marriage, a lot of times the default is we move into destructive patterns. A lot of conflict becomes destructive, not because of the topic, but because of the process. So I always make this distinction between content and process. The content might be great, but the process isn't great. Like, maybe you have this dance that you do of criticism and defensiveness. So the content gets lost in the activation that the process evokes, right? So now you're not mad about what's being said, you're being mad about how it's being said or when it's being said, right? So that's the difference between content and process. We really want to be clear about what are my intentions and what is the process that we agree upon. When we communicate, the content will take care of itself. But if we can agree upon a process like nonviolent communication, and you're both speaking that language, it's going to be so much easier. The other thing I wanted to mention too is that the theory behind it is that we're redirecting conversations that you've been having. Let's say you're in a cycle and you've been playing the same cycle out. And it's like every time we bring it up, we fight and we shut down. Then we don't talk for a few days and then we just get over it, right? And we don't ever really resolve it. It's not really repaired, but we just sweep it under the rug until the next time. And that compounds. And then you can get to the point of no return. So this can really step in and interrupt that pattern in such a way where you know that you are heard and you're respected and you're safe. So the other thing I wanted to mention is that it was developed by a psychologist. It was developed in the 1960s and it was influenced by Carl Rogers, who was all about humanistic psychology, unconditional positive regard, emotional safety. Because you can't develop a therapeutic alliance and you can't really be honest with your therapist if you feel like they don't like you or they're judging you, right? So it was a different way. I want to say touchy-feely, but it isn't really touchy-feely. It's more just like a warm, accepting approach to drawing out honesty, because when we are defensive or when we are in shame, it's really hard to say what's really going on, especially if we've been in relationships where we have felt judged or where we have felt like I'm doing something wrong, this is my fault. And maybe there's things to work on, but what's behind the behaviors is always valid, right? So even if you feel like, well, there's some behaviors that are happening either in my partner or if there's behaviors that are happening inside of me, there are real reasons for it. So if we can not hate on ourselves or not hate on our partners and really look at what's behind it, that's what's going to help so much. This was developed in the civil rights movement and the time of peace activism. So it was really kind of an outgrowth of this, of like love, peace, how can we be kind? How can we stop fighting each other? This idea of if you are somebody who wants to have more harmony, but you also want peace, you want to speak the truth, but you still feel like you can get along, this is the approach to take. It was Marshall Rosenberg, and Marshall Rosenberg worked in really highly charged environments. He worked in schools, he worked in prisons, he even worked in war zones. And so his method was really shaped by his belief that empathy is the most powerful thing. That empathy is what is going to be the fastest way to de-escalate somebody. That's why matching affect, a lot of therapists talk about matching affect. If somebody's upset, and you're too calm in response, you sound like you don't care. You don't want to be as escalated as them either, because then you're not really helping them, right? So it's like finding a way to match affect has always been something that traditional psychology has looked at so that the client feels like, okay, you get it. There is a reason for me. I feel validated in the reason for my feelings. He really wanted that to be the cornerstone of the entire methodology. How can we create a modality of communication that is all about facilitating empathy and removing any blocks to empathy? This is what will help bring the nervous system into a more calm state. If one of you goes into fight or flight, this is going to help a ton. Somebody who goes into fight mode will relax when they feel like you give them empathy. And somebody that goes into shutdown also will relax if they feel like the space between you is safe and there's not a lot of anger between you, right? Doesn't mean you don't have real feelings, but it's like, how do we have our feelings and still be able to communicate in a way where there's a point of connection? We're not losing connection, even though we have feelings about things. This is hard. This is advanced. Now, I should probably say something about nonviolence. Like, what does nonviolence mean? This is basically the idea that violence is harm, not just physical, but it's harm. When you feel hurt, when you feel in shame, when you feel in despair, when you feel attacked or assaulted verbally, right? That's violence. It's blame, it's criticism, it's attacking somebody's character, it's demands, like aggressive demands. And if I don't get what I want from you, I'm going to, you're going to pay for it, right? Like it's control. And it's also withdrawal, like stonewalling, like the kind of withdrawal where you're just pulling away irresponsibly without any promise to return. It's like the silent treatment, and it's emotionally abusive. And it is a form of violence, even though you're not saying anything. And also, I want to say that nonviolence doesn't mean passive. Nonviolent just means that you're communicating without causing emotional injury. No judgments, like you're so selfish, no interpretations. This is hard for most people. Most people don't even realize that their feelings are actually interpretations. And knowing the difference between my emotion and my interpretation is huge. Blame, demands, overgeneralizations as part of globalizing somebody's character. Like, you're this way, you're always doing this, you're never doing this. I noticed that this is how you are. You're sort of like negatively assessing somebody's character, which is hurtful. It hurts. It cuts to the core. Even if somebody's fighting you, you might think it's not affecting them, but it is. And then finally, that stonewalling piece that I mentioned. Even just subtle things like you're not listening, or you don't care, even when we say, like, I feel like you don't care about me, that evokes defensiveness because they want to then say, no, that's not true. But then if that happens, then you feel like they didn't really hear you, because there's a reason why you felt that way. There's something you're trying to communicate, but all they hear is, no, they've got it wrong about me. So now I'm going to step in and defend myself. So the goal is not to suppress emotion, but the goal is to express it without attack. Where this is used, nonviolent communication is used in couples therapy, obviously. It's also used a lot in leadership, in like organizations. There are teams in corporate America or nonprofits that implement these tools in team meetings or staff events, team building things. How can we talk to each other? How can we collaborate with different opinions and still reach the same objective? So that's really powerful in those settings as well. Education and parenting. There's a lot of parenting agencies right now that are incorporating the principles of nonviolent communication. Also mediation, legal mediation, like mediators are trained in this as well. And community conflict resolution. It's a global concept, and it's used by therapists, teachers, corporations, and humanitarian groups. I think it's especially great, obviously, in intimate relationships, because we never feel more triggered than we do in a close, intimate relationship. Nobody pushes our buttons quite like the person that we chose to be with, right? Like, how many times have you heard people say, I don't have this problem with anybody else? I don't have this problem with my best friend or my coworkers. That's because nobody's as close. It's on a primal level, very threatening. Our primary attachment figure has the most power to hurt us. And so that's why it's so important to create that safety in the intimate relationship. Even though you never have perfect safety, it's always taking a risk of some kind. So the core idea behind it, as I touched on earlier, I'm going to go in more detail around this, is that all behavior is an attempt to meet a need. We start with a need, and then that goes to feelings. And then that leads to your reactions. There's a need that you have that's driving your feelings about something. In between there's also an interpretation. You have a need, it's not met. You give that meaning about something. This person doesn't care. I'm not worthy, whatever the meaning is. Then you have feelings as a result of that meaning making. And then you have a reaction and you act it out. That's usually how it goes as humans. I think what I like about this modality is that NVC assumes that people are acting out not because they're bad or rude or horrible or unkind or terrible people. They're acting out because they have unmet needs that they don't know how to communicate. It might be that they were raised in an environment where they were taught again and again and again their feelings don't matter. They don't even know what it looks like to express their feelings. They don't even know what it looks like to have a healthy exchange of true emotional honesty. And so it's not even like a conscious choice to not do it. It's just a lack of capacity or skill. There might be an awareness of, I really want to be able to express this, so I'm going to try the best way I know how from having watched this growing up. And it isn't what it's supposed to be, but it's an attempt, right? So if we can adopt this filter and recognize, and I do this sometimes, or I coach people this too, like with somebody complaining at you or saying something negative, if you can listen to what is the need behind it and just get constructive, what's the request? Every complaint can be turned into a request that comes from a need. So if we can hear the need underneath, and everything softens. Everything softens. There's the fight reactions, the intensity, the escalated nervous system all soothes when we have that. So what makes communication nonviolent? I've talked about what makes it violent. It's clarity about you. What's happening within you. Again, I always say pulling back the curtain, because I think that visually just conveys so much. I'm literally pulling back the curtain. Here's what I feel in my body. When I hear you say that, this is what I feel in my chest, in my stomach. That's microscopic honesty. I'm just sharing. I'm literally offering you what's going on inside of me. I'm not talking about you. Right? That leads me to the second thing of nonviolent communication, which is ownership. I language. I own my reactions. I own my interpretations, my needs, my feelings. And I'm letting you in on what that is. That feels vulnerable, right? How do I do that when I don't have any idea how they're going to, what if they respond in a way where now I feel worse because I told them how I feel? So I acknowledge that it is scary. Also, I think nonviolent communication includes expressions of curiosity. It includes expressing needs over accusations and making requests instead of complaints or demands. Nonviolent communication does not sugarcoat things either. It's not, well, I used the words touchy-feely earlier, which is not right. Because when I think of touchy-feely, it's sort of like we're sugarcoating things and it feels a little bit Pollyanna, like I'm going to pretend things are more positive than they really are. That's not it. It's very clear, but it doesn't sugarcoat. But because of the way you're communicating, it's honest, but not offensive or crossing any lines. It's very much like Terry Reel's feedback wheel. It's a little bit different. because it doesn't talk so much about the narratives, at least in the formula that I'm going to share later. But it's this idea that if fierce intimacy is being honest, it is sometimes you're going to have really negative emotion. But as long as you're sharing it in a way where nobody's getting hurt emotionally, that is what allows true intimacy. That's what allows for the truth to be shared while you're still connected. Shifting from you did this wrong to I feel this because I need this, right? That's sharing, that's pulling back the curtain. And that's the heart of emotional responsibility. It's a responsibility. Also, not everybody deserves it. So what'll be interesting when we implement these things is who in my life over time is going to be able to meet me here. Because if you continue to be vulnerable and open up and share your inner thoughts, feelings, needs with somebody who doesn't really care, then I wouldn't recommend it. Right. But if you're with somebody where you feel like we need to break out of a cycle, it's kind of amazing the power of vulnerability. So much shifts when we see someone's vulnerable. We put down our armor and we have a heart-to-heart connection. So if you can take that risk, you're opening up for that possibility. So there's 4 components to nonviolent communication. There's observations, feelings, not thoughts, the needs, and then there are the requests. And I'm going to go through each one. So the first one is observations. Of course, this is observations without judgment. Facts only, no labeling, no evaluation, no interpreting. For example, facts only would be when you came home at 11:05. That's an observation, totally neutral. A judgment would be, or an evaluation would be when you came home late again. Somebody might argue and say, well, that wasn't technically late because blah, blah, blah. You're getting into the weeds at that point, right? So for part 1, it's just describing the facts with just complete neutrality. When you said these words, when I saw the dishes in the sink, not when you decided to blow off your responsibilities. That's an interpretation. The facts are the dishes are in the sink. I see dishes in the sink. That anchors the conversation in reality, and observations help us develop the conversation in that neutral place. When you looked at your phone is different from saying when you were being rude. When you ignored me at dinner, that's an interpretation. When you looked at your phone during dinner, that's a neutral observation. And it makes a difference because if you lead with something that they want to argue with or defend against, you've already started on the wrong foot. And then you're only going to get frustrated. So this first thing, this observation is very factual. So a violent example would be like, you were so rude. And a nonviolent example would be, I noticed that you looked at your phone while I was talking. A violent way of saying it would be, you never help. You're so lazy. The nonviolent alternative would be, I did the dishes and the laundry this week without help. That's just an observation. Now, they can still read into the judgment, right? And they might, especially if you've been in a cycle where you've been more critical, they're still going to hear the criticism, even as you're trying to do it in the right way. This is what I went through in my relationship. I was trying to do it this way. Like, I'm going to ask a question to get curious instead of assuming, but it would still come across as like, oh, I have to explain myself. Or that question is only being asked because I have a problem with something, right? It took time. It takes time for their psyche to see the changes that you're making. So it does take time and repetition and consistency. But these examples show how very small shifts will allow, it changes the emotional climate, it changes the temperature and the tone, and it allows them to stay present and open to what you're saying as opposed to immediately putting up defenses, which is such a block to connection. The second piece is the feelings. Okay. So after you've made the observation, you say how you feel. You just name the emotion, you stay with your experience and avoid saying things like, I just feel like, because this is such a trick. Everybody does this. I just feel like you don't care. It's innocent enough, right? I'm saying that I feel. It's an I statement. I'm not even, mad at you or accusing you of anything, but it's not a feeling. It's an interpretation. Interpretations are like, yeah, you don't care. The feeling is I'm hurt. The feeling is I'm sad. The feeling is I'm disappointed. The feeling is not I feel like you don't care, right? That's just the meaning that I'm giving it about you. And again, now you're talking about them. So that's what you have to avoid. This is hard to do when you're first starting this, if you haven't ever done this before. But if you can share your feelings, it helps your partner understand your internal world, like what's actually going on for you. It helps you get good at knowing the difference between an emotion and a story, a feeling and an interpretation. There's not that many feelings. There's not that many raw emotions. So some examples would be hurt, lonely, anxious, confused, frustrated, concerned, curious, excited. These are emotions. Feelings, things that are not feelings are abandoned, ignored. It's subtle. This is nuanced because you might very well feel abandoned, but that's not a feeling. It's, I believe I have been abandoned. So then what is the feeling? I feel alone. I feel vulnerable. I feel hurt. I feel angry, despair, whatever it is. Getting used to being able to distinguish between feelings and interpretations is such a game changer. If I could teach just one thing, that would be it. I talk a lot about the feedback wheel and why I love it so much, as opposed to just your standard variety I statement, which everybody knows I statements, right? But it's going a step further to separate those feelings from those thoughts. So focus on your inner experience. I feel sad and scared because I need reassurance. There's no blame here. I feel sad and scared because you didn't reassure me. No, I feel sad and scared because I need this. It's just about you. I don't know how many more times to say it. It feels like obvious content-wise, like it's clear. It's not hard to understand content-wise, but it is really hard to fully embody and internalize as just a normal way of being, because it's not really supported in the larger culture. Now, the third part are the needs. These are universal human needs. So there's the observation, there's the feelings, and what's the needs behind that? Needs are the core human drivers. This is something that when we talk about needs, it's not just like people have preferences. That's not it. Like, I have a need to have my coffee with cream in it. That's not a core human driver. We're talking about things like safety, respect, understanding, support, autonomy, connection. Those are the main core human drivers that we have. And these are universal needs. Every culture shares them. And when you name that need, you're speaking from truth. You can't lie if you're speaking from needs and you're pulling back the curtain when you do that, saying something like, I need connection. I did that because my need was significance. That's another one. I have a need for significance, or I have a need for safety. That lands so much differently than you don't make me feel safe. You don't care about me. You abandon me. Now, why needs matter is because this is all feelings are going to be coming from those unmet needs and the meaning that we make about them. When we talk about needs, we automatically reduce blame. That happens automatically structurally when you follow this. Naming the needs is going to create that sense of possibility, right? Oh, it's constructive. I have this need. Well, maybe there's another way. That's a call to action, right? There's an embedded request in that. And it clarifies what's underneath the emotion or the behavior, which helps you feel closer. If you've ever had a conversation with somebody where you were really put off by them, and then they shared something about what their need was behind that, and you're like, you soften because you realize, okay, I get that. And now you have empathy for them. And so now you're not as mad anymore and you're not as hurt anymore. That's the idea behind this. It helps to look at like past how it's being communicated. You don't want to think like, I'm only going to focus on how they're communicating, even though the process is important. And that is what this whole thing is about. I'm saying have a process. Don't focus so much on content, but the process. But at the same time, on the receiving end of it, if you can look, so that's for you, right? But if they're communicating to you and you know that they're trying and there's something important that they're saying, try to look past how they're saying it and what is the need behind it? What is the positive intent behind it? The positive intent is probably they're trying to get a need met. They're trying to get closer to you. They're trying to repair so they can remove the obstacle to connection with you. Look at what is the need that is seeking to be met. If that's what you're asking all the time, oh my goodness, then you're creating such a safe culture in your relationship, because then your spouse knows you are curious, you are there, you are leaning in. And if they move toward you in distress, you're going to meet them squarely. And that is the basis for emotional connection. And of course, that's empathy is a big part of that. And then finally, the requests. At the end of this communication structure, what is your ask? This is not as easy as it sounds. Most people, if I ask them, what is it that you need in that moment? Or what is it that you need right now? They're upset. They're mad at their spouse. What do you need? What would help you feel better right now? I don't know. That's the hard part. You have to know. And it has to be specific and time bound. It's almost like SMART goals, right? Specific, time bound. It has to be collaborative, and it has to be non-demanding. There is a big difference between a demand and a request. So a request is, would you be willing to do this? Sometimes people don't like to say that. They want to say, you need to do this, because they don't want to take the chance that the other person would say no. But the truth is that if you're in an adult relationship, they always have the right to say no. Like, they don't need to do anything. Saying, would you be willing, instead of you need to, is, for some people, it might feel like almost like it sounds submissive or something. I've heard people say this, but it's actually just the truth of the reality of the situation. All we ever have is the ability to ask somebody for what we need, and then they get to decide if they give that to us or not. Like, that's just not something we get to decide. Also, I know from doing this work and in my own marriage, telling somebody else what they need to do generally does not build connection. Even if they agree with you, even if they know, yep, that needs to be done, it doesn't feel good to be told this is what you need to do, because it sounds like non-optional. It creates a power dynamic, like you're the boss of me and I don't want, and then there can be resistance and stuff. So just saying, here's my need, here's my observation, here's my feeling, here's the need behind it. Would you be willing to this in the future? Right? That opens up space for the collaboration. That opens up the space for them to say, I am, but here's the problem, or I could, but I can't do it then. I can only do it here. That was a game changer for me personally, and I highly recommend that. If you are struggling with getting your needs met, and maybe you're thinking, well, I've done that, and I ask, and then they just never do it. Well, then you have a larger issue. Like, do I want to be with somebody who is not hearing, doesn't care about my needs, and does not want to have a relationship, like where it's like we are navigating our respective needs? That's a relationship. It's not just one person meeting another person's needs. And it's not even two people meeting each other's needs perfectly. It's two people negotiating differences and meeting their needs the best they can. Usually, we're not going to be able to meet the unmet needs from childhood that our spouse's parents didn't meet, right? But we can show up in a way that is healing, like a reparative emotional experience. Your relationship can actually become a container for healing from past traumas if you do it right. So a request example would be, would you be willing to put your phone away at dinner? So, if the example is like, I saw that you took your phone out while we were eating dinner, here's the need I have, here's the feeling that I had. Would you, and then the request is, going forward, when we have a date, would you be willing to put your phone away? Or if you have a need for connection, the ask would be, hey, could we talk for a little bit tonight? Or could we go on a walk? I'd love to go on a walk with you after dinner to reconnect. And you want to make sure that the requests are realistic, that they're actually attainable, that they're in the present, they're clear, and they're doable. Because if we ask for something that they can't give us until the future, if it's something that we're asking them to give us consistently over time in the future, they can't give it to you now. So you haven't really get reconnected then. It's like, what I need is for you to show up in these ways in the future, and we'll see over time if you can do it or not. That isn't something they're giving you in the present moment. Is that doable right now? So it would be more like, I can make a commitment right now. I can agree to consider that. I can make an agreement. I can promise. I can think about that, right? Like whatever it is, it has to be something that is actually doable. If it takes more than one sentence to explain what you're asking, it's probably what you're asking for is more of a strategy as opposed to a clear request. So if we bring it all together, the 4-part model for nonviolent communication is observation, feeling, need, request. What's happened that you've observed, how you felt about what you observed, what you needed, what your need was behind that feeling, and now what you're asking. It's very simple, but it's profoundly regulating. If you can use that, I mean, even just thinking in terms of every communication, if I went through this process, I think it would be a game changer in your relationship. So an example would be, when I saw the dishes in the sink, I felt overwhelmed because I really need support this week. Would you be willing to divide the chores tonight? That is how you take a triggering situation and you turn it into a connected conversation. I'm letting you in on where I'm at. I'm not blaming you, but I'm being assertive at the same time. So there's the honesty piece. You're not sweeping it under the rug. You're not letting them off the hook. And you have to do this in order to prevent resentment. If you just stuff it, then you're in resentment, and that will bring you to the point of no return. Example 2 would be like, going back to the phone example. When you checked your phone, I felt disconnected. That's my feeling, because I have a need for presence. I need your presence in these times. Would you be willing to turn off your phone during dinner? Even small, just like everyday moments where you feel a little irritated, are opportunities to practice nonviolent communication. It could be about the dumbest things. It doesn't matter, because the little things are the big things. The little things are the things. So many people say, oh, it sounds so dumb. Like, this is so dumb. I can't even believe I'm talking about this. But the small things are just the location for the larger dynamics in the relationship. So nothing is too small to practice this on. Remember that the tone matters. You want to lead with a gentle tone. You want to make sure that you are grounded and regulated before you communicate, and you want to own your inner experience. If you feel like you can't come in without blame, then you're not ready, right? I've been guilty of this, where I'm like, I have an urgency that I need to say something, but if I really check in with myself, I'm going to be coming in hot. My tone and my energy and my dysregulation is going to be felt, and it's not going to set it up for success. It might still go well. It might. But if my husband is also having a bad day, it's not going to go well, right? So it just depends. And so check in with yourself and make sure what this does is it forces you to really develop that relationship between the functional adult, higher conscious self and your reactive childlike state that just is reacting and getting triggered and like all over the place. You're developing a relationship between those two parts, and the functional adult is in charge and saying, okay, I'm triggered. What's going on here? It's almost like reparenting yourself. What did you see? What came up for you? How did you feel? What do you need? Okay, let's find another way to get that met. We don't need to act out. We don't need to yell. It's kind of like what we teach kids, right? We don't hit. We don't yell. We don't slam doors. How can we find a different way forward? And you do this within yourself in a very loving nurturing way. And when you have that foundation, it makes it so much easier to be heard. Like it starts with you. It starts with you. So often we're like, if I knew I was going to be heard, well, then I could come in this way. But if you flip the order and say, I'm going to come in this way, take the risk and do that more than once, I mean, several times, especially if you have a pattern, it takes time. Like I said, you might be actually amazed at what you can do. So in conclusion, I love this modality because it de-escalates conflict. It increases empathy. That's really the entire purpose, is empathy. It strengthens your emotional bond, even when you're struggling. There's no reason why you have to be disconnected while you're having a hard time. That's the time we need to be connected the most, is when we're having a hard time. And we end up shooting ourselves in the foot, right? Like, I need connection so bad, but I'm so sure I'm not going to get it, and I'm going to lash out, and then I'm going to not get it. And then that's just going to reinforce my beliefs. And so this is such a massive pattern interrupt when you can do this. It also creates mutual understanding of each other, allows you to get into the us place where you're on the same team. It's you against the problem, as opposed to me versus you. And then finally, it supports long-term repair. Because like I said before, when you have that emotional intimacy and that sense of safety, you can repair. You can go back to the tough stuff and clear it out and turn the page for good. Because now you have new footing. Now you have safety. Now you have a new process of communicating that you both trust. And it's effective because it removes the story and it focuses on the truth. So the best thing you can do right now is to start with you. Tune into your own needs, tune into your own requests, your own feelings, and share them from a place of truth, not from a place of judgment. Don't judge yourself. Don't judge them. It just is what it is. Just share it from that place. And that changes everything. That I can guarantee you. I can't ever guarantee how long it will take before that disrupts the pattern. I also can't guarantee if your spouse can meet you in that place with your healthy evolution in communication, but it is a game changer for you in your relationship with yourself and your up-leveling of your relational health in all areas. It's incredibly empowering. So if you guys are struggling with this and you're wanting support, I want to invite you to a free call. If you guys want to book in, it's a free call and we can see how these things apply to your relationship. And if there's anything that we can do to support you, do a little deeper dive on your dynamics and point you in the right direction, basically. Kind of see, where are you now? Where do you want to be? And how do we bridge the gap? Are there things we need to eliminate? Are there things we need to add? We can help you with that plan. That's it for today. If you like my content, please take a second and either like this video or subscribe to my channel, or both. That will help us reach the people that really need to hear this stuff.